Hello everyone, and welcome to my first ever multiplayer battle since the age of Medieval 2 Total War. I only played one back then, and I'll be frank and honest, I lost. But thankfully, the one and only Milk and Cookies Total War agreed to play a multiplayer battle with me. You'll notice this is a 40v40 match. The game starts out with Milk and Cookies on one side as the Kingdom of Mide. Obviously the Irish Gaelic faction here, really strong in its ranged units. He's got a lot of the woodkerns, a lot of levy skirmishers, and some nice cavalry over here on the sides. Me, I back myself up onto a fancy little hillock. I will admit at the suggestion of Milk and Cookies Total War, because hey, why not? We're playing next to a undefended siege little village, and he is coming to claim the village for himself. Now, as I'm playing Sudreyar in this campaign, Sudreyar is very fancy when it comes to axes. For the most part, my front line is made up of Eastmen, Hirdmen, basic axe infantry, basic sword infantry, which provide a morale buff to everyone around them. I have some elite spear guards in each wing to try and keep his cavalry away from me, and in the center, some berserkers. Now, I'll admit I picked these guys specifically because once they get into battle, they go berserk, and frankly, I won't have to control them, which seemed like a really good idea because my micro is not very good at this point. But it turned out to be a good fight anyway. Now, over to the far right over here, I've stuck some cavalry up in the trees. A little basic melee cavalry, nothing special. That's not what Sudreyar specializes in, but with the intention that when he gets over here, we can obviously try and swing around and catch him by surprise. To round it all off, I've got some archers up on the hill to play Plinko and try and basically ruin his day as he gets closer. And of course, up on the top, my general, nice and safe and sound, with his royal huskarls. Man, those guys look cool. Big, bearded, surly fellas with giant two-handed Dane axes. Kind of hard not to appreciate that. Now, on my front line, I did make sure to include huskarls on the wings because they're basically the Viking version of flanking cavalry. So you got to make sure to have them there. But you'll notice as he's advancing through the woods, his scout troops did pick up my horsemen and immediately backed up. So my plan was instantly foiled. And at this point, it turned into a stalemate because my defending position was pretty strong and he was not about to attack it. So I was forced to come down and actually fight him on the field. And Milk and Cookies decides to go ahead and launch the assault. You'll see here he's keeping his cavalry on the flanks, trying not to let me get around him here. In Viking Age battles, you know, it's all about those flanks. Cannot have people get around you. But he's leading off with his wood spears, basic retinue spears. Follow up by his elite sword infantry, the Eric Warband, and Eric Swordsman. And that's really one of the special units of the Irish. And that's really one of the special units of the Irish, are the elite swordsmen they get to field. Now, that's one of the reasons I made sure to include a lot of axemen in my army, because I knew he'd be bringing a lot of armored infantry with him, and nothing punches through armor like a big hefty axe. I do find it kind of funny that as the battle was getting ready to go, my huskarls decided the best thing to do to waste time was to set their own village on fire, because hey, why not? But it does make everything look a little more epic when looking through a lot of burning flames. So his army's advancing at this point. I decide, hey, the best thing to do is to begin to try and counter his cavalry charge. I'd forgotten, quite frankly, that my units were sitting over here, and he began to peg away at them. But unfortunately, his cavalry is a little better than mine, and especially as skirmisher cavalry can stay well out of reach of my mailed horsemen. I try and continue my flanking maneuver, but he has enough, way more horsemen than I do, and I quickly realize my mistake and try and get my guys out of there. Obviously, though, not quite fast enough, and we get caught out. Now, taking advantage of the distraction, I try and get my guys to actually go a runner right into the back of his infantry right here before they can get to my main line, try and do some basic damage. But unfortunately, before we can get there, his troops do catch me out again. At this point, nothing for it. It's time to actually get involved in melee combat. And so the shield walls come together. With some archer support on my end. And as I do outnumber him in infantry, I take advantage of the infantry superiority. He's put his men in a shield castle to avoid the arrow fire. The shield castle does not protect you from some big burly Vikings. Now, my mailed axemen are doing pretty well against his retinue infantry, but they're not going to have enough oomph to finish out the fight. Best thing to do, send in the berserkers. So I send the berserkers right in the middle of his line. I'll admit to you there was not a whole lot of a plan to this. It's mainly put as much pressure as I could right on his center. Now, you'll notice I've already lost the cavalry battle here, and he has now begun to swing his cavalry around and take advantage of his better numbers. I'm trying to move my spearmen back into position to protect my archers, but it is just too late. He's already issued the command, and they're coming. So, as you may not, even though cavalry was not the dominant force in the period, there's still nothing to be sneezed at, and these archers are about to find out just how unfortunate their night today is becoming. Good night. Really drilled them right there. I really feel bad for these guys now, man. I really should have done something better. But that's okay. I put in my Royal Huscarls in, and he finds out what Huscarls can do to mounted horsemen. They don't have any shields, but in this case, they don't need to. Just a big axe to the face. Now, he realizes what's going on pretty quick and starts pulling his horsemen back out. But back in the center, my infantry are winning that battle. You may be able to plink them away one by one with javelins, but one by one, the fight is swinging my way. Unfortunately, every single one of my archers is massacred in the meantime. But he's just got so many stinking skirmishers, and the Sudreyar really doesn't have a strong counter to the skirmishers, if I'm honest. You know, great hard infantry right in the center, and it can definitely field some archers to hit, but nowhere at the speed they can. They're just so much better at the skirmishing. So, lines come together. We have the Gallo Glass versus the Huscarls. Same basic idea behind them. Giant big axemen coming together that are fighting it out. This is a fight that I cannot win. Obviously getting flanked on both sides here and hit from behind. His cavalry taking their time and wiping out the rest of the archers back there so they can't come back and reinforce. He has no choice left to actually bring his skirmishers in the rest of the way as they're starting to run out of ammo. But you'll notice this front point in the battle, the bodies are piling up. The berserkers are doing what they do best and going berserk, running right into battle and chasing down the enemy. But you'll notice his javelin men, so long as they are left to do what they do, are just eating through this line right here. At this point, he decides to commit his cavalry to a final charge. But luckily I managed to get my spear guard into a shield castle and kind of hold their line. Obviously he doesn't want to just run his folks right in on there on that. But you'll notice the battle is quickly coming to a close. My units are slowly becoming surrounded by by spear throwers and cavalry, and he's trying to get that final blow in. Now, in a very K&I-esque situation, I'm surrounded on all sides, but luckily my infantry is stronger on the inside than his is on the out. So if they can just hold out, you'll notice how many of his units are beginning to rout, because once they're out of ammo, there's just not a lot these javelin men can do. That's right, and that's what a Huscarl can do. Goodness, look at him getting in there. So the cavalry standoff continues. Repositioning. Trying to keep my shields face towards the skirmisher cavalry, because if they get a hold of them with those spears, it's all over. I managed to get one good charge in, though. And one spearman get into the cavalry. It's just bad news. At this point, his enemy general dies. I get a much-needed morale boost. But unluckily, my general is also stuck right in the middle of combat as well. There's not much I can do. You'll notice him over here in these last desperate bits of combat. Only 43 guys left. So my spearman managed to repel that final that charge of his cavalry, but is it enough to actually take the battle? So, yet again, trying to group my men back together. We don't want them chasing these guys off into the nowhere. The Mide faction is very good about kiting the enemy, taking those skirmishers, throwing the javelins, taking the skirmishing. Can't fight his fight. Gotta fight it my way. So, I take the Royal Huscarls and charge them in. But you'll notice already I'm committed to a fight that I can't win, because from behind will come the Gallo Glasses to land that heavy blow right into my troops there. And that's when it gets our general right there. Bad move on my part. Should have tried to pull him back, and he makes me pay for it. You'll notice my units just begin to rout. They're just running away rather than stay and fight this fight. Nothing to be done. Now, at this point, it all comes down to the Spear Guard. Now, these guys have ironically not gotten very much action this fight, mainly because they have been what he's been avoiding. His cavalry have been trying to outflank them the entire match, and at this point, there's the only thing left on the field is the spears. So, skirmishers can't do anything. Horsemen, all out of ammo, and they're all javelins. So, if they happen to come in on the spears, there's nothing they can do to stop it. This is a Tier 3 upgraded spear unit, and even though it looks like it's completely outnumbered, it's going to come down to the line. You'll notice they're shrugging off every unit that comes at them right here. I did not expect these guys to hold as well as they did, but just goes to show you the power of that advanced infantry. Now, making sure to keep their shields facing towards the javelins so that they get stuck into the front of the shields there. You don't want to eat those, they go right through armor. So, with no actual infantry left, he begins to try a flanking technique. He's got to keep me pinned on one side so his cavalry can wrap around and hit me from behind. Nothing I can do about it. I let him come to me, and at the last second, try and charge onto the cavalry. Maybe he doesn't see it coming, but let's be honest here, he's been doing this a heck of a lot longer than I have, and treats me like the noob I am, if I'm frank and honest. So, nothing left for it. Charge back onto the javelins, knowing full well that as soon as I engage, the death blow will come from behind. But, considering it's my first multiplayer battle, I think in the history of Total War, like I said, one battle there I remember back in my Medieval 2 days is Scotland, where I basically formed a Schultron and it was useless. Not bad, considering it came down to just those few units right there at the end. And goodness, look at them, still going. Now, the cavalry gets stuck in, good solid charge right into the rear. You know, people like to complain that cavalry don't hit with enough force in this game, but if you get a solid cavalry charge into the rear of an enemy, nothing they can do to stop it, because cavalry is meant to be flanking, especially in these heavy melee troops like this. And just like that, it's all over. My guys are still fighting, excellent morale on them, but it's just a matter of time now. All that has to happen is one more line land, And even though I'm charging into them, they can easily just pull away. You can already see they're beginning to rout, but somehow they managed to hold for this entire fight right there in the middle. And so I say thank you, and I salute the spear guard. And on the final screen, you find out just how deadly these berserkers really are. Going in there, 282, 275 kills. So many units, over 200. Now compare that with the archers, next to nothing. Goodness, the spear, the mailed horseman basically shouldn't have even been there. Now on his side, you'll notice so many pinging away across the entire army. But good night. When it says, when you think of Sudreyar, think of axemen. Milk and the Cookies Total War was awesome. Thank him so much for actually sitting down. He was very patient with me on this battle. Considering it was my first battle, I had a great time. This is obviously just playing a Sudreyar because I'm allowed to talk about them for the next 2 days. He had Mide as well. Look for another battle that he was kind enough to record with me coming up later.